This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I am very honored to be with Bill Berrien, owner and CEO of Pindel Global Precision in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thank you for being here, Bill. Welcome to the show.
Noah, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I am really excited to talk to Bill. He has a very interesting background. A lot of people in precision machining have, diverse stories how they got in. But Bill's is a bit unique, I think. So before we launch into your story, I just want to get a little context. Give me like the 3-minute summary of Pindel, just so people know, what we're talking about.
Great. So 3-minute summary of Pindel. Company founded 1947, so exactly 75 years ago, downtown Milwaukee. All multi-spindle screw machines, Acme's, and it was actually in the basement of a building on First and Walnut. Came out to the suburbs, New Berlin, in the 60s. In the 90s, got into CNC machining more as secondary operations for parts blanked off the multi-spindle. And I acquired in 2012. And so for the last 10 years have been leading and growing the company. So our traditionally a very industrial client base, customer base orientation. But a few years back, we incubated another company, Liberty Precision, which is a portion of our existing, mainly the CNC equipment, to go after defense, aerospace, and medical markets.
Very good. Good. And we're going to get into detail on that stuff in a bit. So now I want to get your background. You're interesting because you both have a formal business school background and a military background. So let's just take it from way back to when you were in school the first time. When you went to Princeton, correct?
I did. Yep.
Okay. So what were you interested in when you attended Princeton at first?
So studied political science, politics, economics, so sort of a liberal arts path, but did most of my internships during college on Wall Street. But I guess if there's maybe outside of the classroom, a theme, it was around the leadership side of life. I played 4 years of Division I water polo, and was captain of the team senior year.
Wow.
Yeah, loved it.
Isn't it interesting how Princeton is a Division I school?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of the strength varies by the sport.
Are all the Ivy Leagues Division I?
I believe they are. Smaller as they are. Not when I was there, but a couple of years later, water polo went to the Final Four of the NCAAs. There were a lot bigger sports, basketball, but lacrosse, things like that.
Okay, so water polo, and then after you graduate, you became a Navy SEAL, and I would think that water polo actually might. Did your water polo skills help?
Oh yeah. It's we always say what the ref can't see, the ref can't call. So a little bit, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Very, very physical game.
Yeah, it's physical. You're like fighting underwater and treading water.
Yep, swimming with contact. And really, really cohesive group. The quality of an East Coast water polo team is entirely dependent on how many West Coast recruits you get. And I was from New York, so I wasn't the best player. What
does it have to do with West Coast recruiting?
Because out in the West Coast, they play water polo in high school. So, and most of it's a much more active elementary school and high
So
school.
you had never played water polo before you got
No,
to college?
I didn't. No.
Interesting. It kind of reminds me of I was at University of Wisconsin, and they when I got there, they tried to recruit me for crew. They
Ah, nice.
You get
Yes.
on campus and they're like, "You're tall. How about you go out for crew?"
Yeah, actually, my 18-year-old son is talking to the coaches there about possible. He was actually trying to
In Madison.
at Madison. Yeah, he was hoping to enlist after high school and go into the SEALs, enlist in the Navy. And just the last couple months, decided to put a couple of applications in, and all that conditioning and prep put him in a great place to on the erg. So he's been pursuing that and doing really well. So we'll see how it rolls, see how
Cool.
it pans out.
Okay, so you go to a prestigious university, Princeton, you're poli-sci. Uh, did you know anybody else that was interested in going into the military when you were there?
They have an ROTC program,
Sure.
so Army and Air Force. They don't have Navy, but it was actually a buddy classmate of mine who told me about this path of officer candidate school in the SEALs, and just at that point said, I'm doing that.
Why
And
the SEALs? I mean, there's a gazillion other things in the military too. Why do people choose the SEALs? Does it have the most prestige? Is it considered the hardest or
I like the mission profile, the direct action, it's a special reconnaissance. So I like that, the small team dynamic. It had, when I was applying, there were only a handful of books. It was really tough to find magazine articles. So it was
what are we talking? What time frame?
89, 90.
89, 90.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was actually getting my Navy physical the morning that we invaded Panama. So it was,
Panama.
yeah, just cause it was weird. Being in the waiting chair to go get an EKG and seeing that coming across the TV. So it brought home. Here I was applying for that community, and sadly, 4 SEALs were killed on Patia. But it just brought home the seriousness of it. So, but I loved. I was in 9 years, commanded 3 SEAL platoons. Helped lead a Army Special Forces ODA down to Colombia for 3 months, and then I was an aide at the very end, an aide to a one of the commanding generals within the community. But I love that small unit dynamic, very capable individuals acting together as a team.
So you were an officer in the SEALs. Okay. But to be an officer, I'm just going by where I see in the movies and stuff. So to be an officer, you have to go through the same stuff as anybody. It's just as hard to be an officer in the SEALs. Is it harder to get in as an officer?
It might be harder to get the slot to go. I had to wait about 18 months in order to get the slot to go to officer candidate school and then go in the SEALs. But I would say, once you're in the training, everyone's going through the same crucible.
So what would happen if you went to officer training and then you could just as easily wash out after officer training?
Sure. Yep. I mean, the attrition rate is high on both officer and enlisted sides. Sure.
How many people make it?
It has about an 80% attrition rate. So our class started with 121 and graduated 21.
Wow.
Yeah, but friendships for life.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of pride in, at graduation, there's sort of 2 awards given. One is the honor man for the top performing Buds candidate, and the other is the Fire in the Gut award that's voted on by the class. And I was the Fire in the Gut winner, or honoree. So that was nice. Just reflecting sort of a lot of motivation and
wow,
resilience. So I was honored by my class for that.
Interesting. And it's just really interesting to me. I've read various books. I read a book by David Goggins, and he talks about being in the SEALs and just the craziness of it, how difficult it is to, like, what was the most difficult part of getting in? Was it, I remember in that book, I think he said it was the knots tying, like underwater or something.
Yeah, and that you do the underwater knot tying after Hell Week, so your lungs and your endurance are just destroyed, and there you are at the bottom of the pool, 10 or 12 feet, holding your breath, tying 5 knots. I thought pool comp was pretty challenging. So you put on your diving rig, you're down at the bottom of the pool, and instructors are coming down, ripping gear off you, tying up your hoses, which are the World War II type that, when you tie them, it really does cut the air off. And you're just solving problems, and hopefully, managing your stress and all that. Yeah, but everyone has their challenges. You lose a lot of people during Hell Week, but you also lose people during dive physics. And
were there any fatalities?
not in my class, no.
How often does that happen?
Once every 2 or 3 years. If anything, the military in general, and especially the SEALs, are very good about learning lessons. And when something goes wrong, collectively picking it apart, understanding what went wrong, and then fixing your process, fixing whatever it is so it doesn't happen again. We always had a saying, the most valuable lessons were learned in blood, sadly. So yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, pretty infrequent. I don't know all the statistics, but I'll say I don't think there have been two fatalities for the same reason.
What's one of the biggest misconceptions about the SEALs and the military in general, the U.S. military?
Great question. I mean, I think what is maybe not as well known is, by the sort of the civilian world, is just how smart and adaptable and problem solving oriented all areas of the military are, and it's really sort of I was just so impressed by the folks that I served with, in the SEALs and in the broader.
Do you think that's because we always hear about the blunders? It's kind of like that's really all that comes in the news rather than, everything that goes right.
No, I think, it's interesting growing up, late 70s, early 80s, someone said like, oh, military intelligence is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But God, that I don't know if that was speaking to Korea or Vietnam or what, but it certainly wasn't the military I experienced. Where the data, acquired, analyzed, intelligence understood, and the thoughtfulness that goes into acting on that intelligence was profound. So so I would say that would be also maybe a misconception, or just at least an unknown, unappreciated.
Right. Well, to me, it seems like, I don't know, war is hell and messy, and we've been in some, 18-year, 20-year wars, and things often haven't gone the way, the people in charge said they would or thought they would. And so I think it's easy to second guess, overall strategy.
Well, I mean, there's stuff at the strategic level, but also, at the tactical level on the ground, the reality is the enemy gets a vote. They get a say in how this problem is going to be solved, and they don't, they're not always going to vote the way you think they vote.
Sure.
which
Yeah,
is going to
you
make it a very dynamic situation.
absolutely. Just a few other things about this. I mean, were you were you in Kosovo? Was that one of your missions?
Bosnia, Bosnia.
Bosnia.
Yeah.
I get it all confused.
Kosovo, I was in Kosovo, but not in a sort of a tactical capacity. But in Bosnia, I led my platoon
So
there.
what did you guys do? What did that mean leading your platoon? You
Yeah, I mean, we were a quick reaction force for things that might go on there. We were also part of some multinational efforts around, identifying and locating uh, persons indicted for war crimes. The acronym is PIFWICS. So it was a lot of the NATO forces that were actively trying to find and capture those folks. Yeah, so it was it was dramatic seeing the ethnic destruction there, right at that point in the after the fighting, and still during some incidents. Yeah, and then I also spent about 4 years going down to South America with platoons. So spent a lot of time in Colombia.
was that what the war on drugs? Is that
Yeah, all related to that, counter narcotics and, working with and training their forces and things like that. Yeah.
interesting? When we talked before, and I think this is going to sort of segue into the business. You mentioned the middle management of our platoons, the
NCO,
the
non-commissioned
N,
officers.
the NCO.
Yep.
So explain what the NCO is and how that really fits into our military versus other militaries, and then we'll segue into the business aspects of it.
Oh, great. No. So, the NCO so it stands for non-commissioned officer. So you have, you know, lower enlisted, there's, enlisted has an E acronym or a E prefix before it. So, sort of E through 6. E5 to E9 is your NCOs, your non-commissioned officers. So they aren't commissioned officers, but they have very significant leadership responsibilities within whatever the fighting unit is. SEAL platoon, Army company, Army battalion, Marine Corps company, et cetera. And then you have the commissioned officers that.
That's you. That's
That
what
was
you were.
that was me. That's right. So I was assistant platoon commander and then a platoon commander. But it's the NCO Corps and their leadership and their professionalism that I think is without a doubt, the biggest differentiator and accelerant in our military, and its differentiation from other militaries. You look at the Russians right now. They're losing generals left and right. And, I think a big part of their problem is they have such a poor and poorly trained NCO Corps actually is supposed to be leading the troops on the ground.
Do they even have an NCO Corps?
I don't know. I don't know the details of their.
Yeah, nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah, their order of battle. But I think what you're finding is what should be that layer of tactical leadership isn't there. And so these, generals are going to the front to direct, troops at a much lower level. It's not what they do well. And, and they're getting shot and killed at a much higher rate. So it really is that professionalism. And
so would that be like the equivalent of like a 3-star general here going into combat? Like,
yeah, but I think sort of going to the front lines to actually direct troops and tanks and things like that, where normally there's there are other levels of the profession that would be executing the commander's intent. But
Interesting.
that's missing on the Russians right now. They're big on big weapon systems, but they're not, they don't seem to be any longer big on the people development side.
Right. And I was reading about the Ukrainian army, and the guy who's the head there studied the US military very closely. And I think this was one of the things that he embraced. Are you familiar with that?
Not the specific details, but I would say, based on what I read, that it seems pretty accurate that you want to be modeling off of the U.S. military and how it both trains and expects more from more of its troops.
And you think it expects more of its troops than anywhere else in the world? Or you can't really opine on anywhere else in the world, but a lot of places.
But I think our NCO development stands out. And just to if you wouldn't, I think you'd like to go in this direction, but just to I've got this thesis around advanced manufacturing and the military's development of its NCO Corps, that up until the early 70s, when up until we went to a all-volunteer professional army, I believe that the advanced manufacturing field was largely in line with our NCO development back then. That a lot was very based on the unit or the company someone was working for. There weren't necessarily rigorous standards for progression.
So wait, you're saying back in old times, there was less NCOs?
Less focus on NCO development and that professional. And when we shifted to
so it was more top down versus, say, in business now with.
Correct.
That is interesting. So there's a parallel between how business has shifted and maybe how the military has shifted.
Yeah, and
when did that shift take place? When it became an all volunteer, or after we had been through so many terrible experiences and that was one of the things they learned? Or
yeah, I mean, when it shifted to less of a drafted military and more of a all volunteer, professionally developed military, we added 2 more enlisted pay grades, E8, E9, implemented very structured and rigorous examinations and boards and reviews for advancement, to become an NCO and then advancement within. We developed senior enlisted academies to, further bolster that professionalism of the NCO Corps. But it's interesting, up until then, until, Vietnam, so manufacturing was on that same path. But then in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you started to get, you didn't get that upward tick in professional development of advanced manufacturing. You were, you saw a lot of manufacturing shift overseas or, shift to other countries. You started to see it getting pulled out of high schools, the industrial arts and things like that. You didn't see it emphasized as much. And I think that pendulum is swinging back, and I think one of the opportunities for the advanced manufacturing world is to take some of those pages out of the military playbook on how it developed its NCOs and apply them to our advanced manufacturing workforce, and creating professional development and more rigorous standards for gaining responsibility and exposure, but in essence, trying to really create the profession of advanced manufacturing, where, profession shouldn't be just lawyers, doctors, and accountants. It should be, the teams that, you're familiar with, that we're helping grow here. It should be, that profession should be rewarding, it should be enduring, and frankly, it should be transferable, so that much like an accountant that moves from Milwaukee to Cincinnati, their professional credential doesn't disappear. Their value doesn't go away. It should be the same thing for a machinist, that, they move or they go to another company. What they know shouldn't be specific to Pindel. It should be, meeting an industry standard. And I think that's a little bit of the opportunity that the military offers in that example of how you develop that very professional NCO core. Let's apply it to our industry.
They're very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so you did your time. You were in the military for 9 years.
9 years. Yep.
How long are people normally in the SEALs for? That sounds like a long time.
I mean, the initial commitment is 4 years. Typically the times you'd see people getting out are 4 years, then 9-10 years.
Did you think you were gonna, maybe it was gonna be your career, your calling?
Yeah. No, I loved it. I mean,
so why did you leave?
Well, in 99, in relative terms, a fairly peaceful stretch of years.
So you've never been in a firefight?
Correct. So
interesting.
Yep. But that's
yeah, I mean, it's what you were dealt. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
not your fault.
No. And there's an old adage that you don't train special operations forces on a dime. And so the reality
But I mean, did you know any people that, I mean, it's different if you haven't been in a spot where somebody right next to you was shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's you are training your forces, your platoons and stuff, as if it can happen any day, and that's the mindset you need to have. So there's an old saying, sort of earn your trident every day, and we're, as a community, we're sort of back in that, without active combat, Afghanistan, Iraq. Sort of not that there isn't stuff going on in the world, but on a sort of a larger scale. And the trick in this sort of interwar period is to, maintain the edge, the forces, keep them trained, so you don't end up with that, what we saw between sort of World War I, World War II.
Is our military depleted right now?
I don't have enough sort of information to know. I don't think so. I'm not in the best position to know.
Yeah, I don't know. All I hear is sound bites here and there, like, all right, this is fascinating, and hopefully we'll touch on it some more. But now it's gonna get just as interesting. So you finally, okay, 9 years, you decided you probably wanted some movement in your life. I'm guessing that was kind of the case.
Well, we had the .com boom at 99. It looked like the world was changing, and all the action seemed like it was.
Little did you know did you know you were getting out at the right time or the wrong time.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I was in business school, and I was interviewing for actually a job at Enron. And the next day they declared bankruptcy.
The next day?
Next day, it was crazy. Yeah.
You have interesting timing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I didn't accept an offer and forego others, and then they declare. So I would say the timing was pretty good.